The city buzzed with life as people hurried along the sidewalks, their footsteps echoing against the pavement. Cars honked impatiently, and street vendors shouted to catch the attention of passers-by. In the middle of all this chaos stood a small cafe tucked between two tall buildings. It wasn't fancy, just a cozy little place where locals stopped for coffee before heading off to work or school. This was where our story began. Behind the counter stood a young girl in her late teens. She had tied her hair into a messy bun, and though she looked tired, there was something warm about her smile. Her name tag read Emily, but most customers barely noticed it. To them, she was just another face serving cups of steaming coffee. But Emily wasn't like everyone else. Despite her humble surroundings, she carried big dreams inside her heart. Dreams of a better life, for herself and for her mom, who worked tirelessly to keep food on the table. Her mother raised her alone after her father disappeared years ago. No one knew exactly what happened to him. One day, he simply left, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. Life hadn't been easy since then, but Emily refused to let bitterness take over. Instead, she poured her energy into helping her mom and holding on to hope that things would get better someday. On this particular afternoon, rain drizzled outside, forcing pedestrians to huddle under umbrellas or dash into nearby shops. The cafe was busier than usual, filled with soggy jackets and damp shoes. Emily moved quickly, balancing trays and refilling mugs while trying not to spill anything. That's when he walked in. He was hard to miss. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and exuding an air of authority, he seemed out of place among the regular crowd. His sharp features and piercing eyes made him look almost intimidating, yet there was something magnetic about his presence. People glanced at him curiously, wondering who he might be. Emily recognized him instantly. It was Alexander Drake, one of the richest men in the city. Everyone knew his name. His face was plastered across magazines and billboards. She felt a flutter of nerves as he approached the counter. Up close, he looked even more imposing. His dark coat dripped with rainwater, and his leather briefcase gleamed despite the gloomy weather. He ordered a black coffee without sugar, his voice deep and clipped. Emily nodded, punching the order into the register. As she handed him the receipt, her gaze fell on his hand, the one resting casually on the counter. On his finger sat a ring. It was silver, simple yet elegant, with intricate engravings along its surface. Something about it struck Emily as familiar. Her breath hitched. Could it be? She blinked, thinking maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But no, the resemblance was uncanny. That ring looked exactly like the one her mother kept hidden away, in a small wooden box at home. Her father had given it to her mother years ago, a token of love and promise. After he vanished, her mother refused to talk about him or the ring. All Emily knew was that it held immense sentimental value. And now, here it was, or at least a version of it, on the finger of a billionaire she'd never met. Summoning every ounce of courage, Emily cleared her throat. "Hi, sir," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. I couldn't help but notice your ring. My mom has one just like it." Alexander froze mid-motion, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. For a moment, he didn't respond. His expression remained unreadable, but Emily thought she saw a flicker of surprise or perhaps discomfort in his eyes. Then, without saying a word, he reached into his wallet, placed a few bills on the counter, and turned to leave. "Wait!" Emily called out instinctively, but he was already walking away. She watched as he pushed open the door and disappeared into the rainy streets. Customers around her resumed their conversations, oblivious to the strange exchange that had just occurred. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened. Why did he have a ring identical to her mother's? What did it mean? Was it possible that her father's disappearance was connected to someone like Alexander Drake? Questions swirled in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the mysterious man and the secrets his ring might hold. Later that evening, as she trudged home through the wet streets, Emily replayed the encounter over and over again. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't ignore this coincidence. Somehow, some way, she had to find out the truth. Little did she know, her quest for answers would lead her down a path far more complicated and dangerous than she could ever imagine. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Emily. Her mind kept circling back to the man in the cafe, the ring on his finger, and the strange way he had reacted when she mentioned it. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something hidden beneath the surface. As soon as her shift ended, she grabbed her bag and headed home, her thoughts racing faster than her feet could carry her. Her apartment wasn't much, just a small two-bedroom place tucked away on the 5th floor of an old building. The walls were thin and the heater always seemed to rattle, but it was home. It was where she and her mom had built their lives together after everything fell apart. When Emily walked in, her mom was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through a pile of bills. Her face looked tired, but there was a quiet strength about her, the kind that came from years of holding things together no matter how hard life got. "Hey," Emily said softly, dropping her bag by the door. Her mom glanced up and smiled. "How was work?" Emily hesitated. She didn't want to upset her mom, but she also knew she couldn't keep this to herself. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "Mom, I need to ask you something." Her mom frowned, setting the papers aside. "What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." For a moment, Emily wasn't sure how to start. She twisted her fingers nervously, trying to find the right words. Finally, she blurted out, "Do you remember Dad's ring? The one he gave you before he left?" Her mom stiffened. Her hands froze mid-air, and her expression turned guarded. "Why are you bringing that up now?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "I saw someone today," Emily continued, ignoring the tension in the room. "A man. He was wearing a ring that looked exactly like Dad's. Same design, same engravings. It was weird." Her mom's eyes widened, and for a second, she looked like she might cry. But then she shook her head, forcing a weak smile. "It's probably just a coincidence. Rings like that aren't exactly unique." "No, Mom, it's not a coincidence," Emily insisted. "I know what I saw, and the way he reacted when I mentioned it. He looked scared or guilty or, I don't know. Something wasn't right." Her mom sighed heavily, leaning back in her chair. For a long time, she didn't say anything. She stared at the table, lost in thought, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood. Emily waited patiently, knowing how hard it was for her mom to talk about the past. Finally, her mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're right," she admitted. "That ring, it's not just a piece of jewelry. It's tied to your father's story, to why he left." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Her mom hesitated again, as if weighing whether or not to share the truth. Then, with a shaky breath, she began to speak. "Your dad, he wasn't just an artist. He was brilliant, yes, but he was also ambitious. He wanted to make a name for himself, to create something meaningful. But success doesn't come easy, especially when you're starting with nothing. One day, he met someone, a powerful man who promised him opportunities, connections, funding for his projects. At first, it seemed like a miracle. Your dad was so excited. He thought this was his chance to finally provide for us, to give us the life we deserved. But," Emily prompted, sensing there was more. "But it wasn't that simple," her mom said, her voice cracking. "The man had strings attached. He wanted favors in return, things your dad wasn't comfortable with. At first, it was small stuff, but then it got bigger. Your dad started pulling away, saying he didn't want any part of it. But the man wouldn't let him go. He threatened him, told him he'd ruin everything he cared about if he tried to back out. That's when your dad decided to leave. He thought disappearing was the only way to protect us." Tears streamed down her mom's face as she spoke, and Emily felt her own throat tighten. She had always wondered why her dad had left, but hearing the truth hurt more than she expected. "Did he ever try to contact you?" she asked quietly. Her mom shook her head. No, not once. I think he believed staying away was the safest thing he could do, but losing him, it broke me, Emily. I never stopped loving him, but I also never forgave him for leaving us. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain tapping against the window. Emily reached out and took her mom's hand, squeezing it gently. We'll figure this out, she said firmly. Whatever happened, we'll find the truth. Her mom nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. Just be careful, okay? People like that man, they don't play fair. If you dig too deep, you might uncover things you can't undo. Despite her mom's warning, Emily felt a spark of determination ignite within her. She couldn't ignore the connection between her dad's ring and the mysterious billionaire. There had to be a reason why Alexander Drake had it, and she was determined to find out. Later that night, Emily lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if her dad hadn't left willingly? What if he had been forced into something, or worse? And what role did Alexander Drake play in all of this? The questions swirled endlessly, keeping her from sleep. The next morning, she woke up with a plan. She would start by learning everything she could about Alexander Drake. If anyone held the key to unlocking her dad's story, it was him. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. Men like him didn't become billionaires by being open books. They guarded their secrets fiercely, and prying them loose would take patience, strategy, and maybe even a little luck. As she got ready for work, Emily steeled herself for the journey ahead. She didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to stop until she found them. Whatever it took, she would uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for her mom and for the father she barely remembered. The morning after her talk with her mom, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. There was fear, yes, fear of what she might uncover, but there was also a burning curiosity that refused to be ignored. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Digging into the life of someone as powerful as Alexander Drake wasn't something most people would dare to do, but Emily didn't care about being cautious or playing it safe. For once, she wanted answers more than anything else. Her first step was simple: research. Armed with just her phone and a notebook, she started by typing his name into the search bar. It didn't take long for results to flood the screen. Articles, interviews, photos, he was everywhere. A self-made billionaire who had clawed his way out of poverty to build an empire. That's what everyone called him. The media loved him, painting him as a symbol of success and determination. But beneath all the glitz and glamour, Emily sensed there was another story waiting to be told. One that no one dared to write about. She scrolled through page after page, jotting down details that caught her attention. Most of it was surface-level stuff. How he grew up in a rough neighborhood, dropped out of school at 16, and hustled odd jobs until he landed his big break. What intrigued her most, though, were the whispers of controversy. Not everyone admired him. Some articles hinted at shady deals, lawsuits filed against him, and accusations of bullying smaller businesses into submission. None of it was proven, but the rumors were enough to make Emily pause. One thing stood out above everything else. A name kept popping up in connection with Drake's early days. An older man named Victor Langston. According to the stories, Langston had been Drake's mentor, the person who pulled him out of obscurity and set him on the path to wealth. But Langston himself was a mystery. He rarely appeared in public, and when he did, it was always flanked by bodyguards or hidden behind dark sunglasses. From what Emily could gather, he was involved in all sorts of industries, from real estate to finance to art collecting. And then, about 10 years ago, he vanished completely. No explanation, no farewell, just gone. Emily stared at the screen, her mind racing. Could Langston have been the powerful man her dad got tangled up with? Was he the one who threatened her father and forced him to leave? If so, what role did Drake play in all of this? Was he complicit, or was he just another pawn in Langston's game? Determined to dig deeper, Emily decided to visit the local library. Books and newspapers might not seem exciting compared to online searches, but they often held nuggets of information that digital algorithms missed. Plus, libraries were quieter, giving her space to think without distractions. She spent hours poring over old magazines and archived news clippings, piecing together fragments of Drake's rise to fame. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. What struck her most was how calculated Drake seemed. Every move he made appeared deliberate, almost cold-blooded. He didn't stumble into success. It was like he engineered it. Deals were struck overnight, competitors mysteriously folded under pressure, and properties changed hands faster than anyone could keep track. It was impressive, sure, but it left Emily feeling uneasy. How much of his fortune was built on fairness, and how much came from exploiting others? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the library floor, Emily leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Her head throbbed from staring at tiny print for hours, but she couldn't stop now. Something was nagging at her, a hunch she couldn't quite put into words. She grabbed her phone and opened the photo gallery. Earlier, she'd snapped pictures of some of the articles she found interesting, hoping to revisit them later. One image in particular caught her eye, a grainy black and white photograph of Victor Langston standing beside a younger version of Alexander Drake. Between them sat a third man, partially obscured by Langston's broad frame. At first glance, the man didn't stand out. He looked ordinary, unremarkable even, but something about him tugged at Emily's memory. She zoomed in on the image, squinting at the pixelated face. His features were blurry, distorted by poor resolution, but there was something familiar about the tilt of his head, the curve of his jawline. She gasped, dropping her phone onto the table. It couldn't be. Could it? Her heart pounded as she scrambled to retrieve the device. Flipping through the photos on her phone, she found one she'd taken years ago, an old family portrait sitting on her mom's dresser. Her dad stood tall and proud, his arm wrapped around her mom's shoulders. She held the phone side by side, with the library photo comparing the two faces. They weren't identical, but the resemblance was undeniable. The man in the photo with Langston and Drake, it had to be her dad. A shiver ran down her spine. If her suspicions were correct, then her dad hadn't just crossed paths with these men. He'd been part of their world. But why? What role had he played? And why had Langston erased him from the picture entirely? The questions swirled in her mind like a storm, threatening to overwhelm her. She needed to talk to someone who might know more, someone who could confirm her theory, but who? Her mom had already warned her not to dig too deep, and reaching out to Drake directly felt reckless. Still, she couldn't ignore the possibility that he held the key to unlocking the truth. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emily replayed the events of the day in her head. She thought about her dad, the man she barely remembered, but desperately wanted to understand. She thought about her mom, carrying the weight of loss for so many years. And she thought about Drake, the enigmatic billionaire whose ring sparked this whole chain of events. For better or worse, she realized, she was in too deep to turn back now. Whatever secrets lay buried in the past, she was determined to unearth them. Not because she craved revenge or riches, but because she owed it to her family, to herself, to find closure. But finding closure meant confronting danger. Men like Drake and Langston didn't get to where they were by letting people pry into their lives. If Emily pushed too hard, she risked stepping into territory she wasn't prepared for. Yet, as she drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in her mind. The truth was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in years. Her mind was buzzing with ideas, theories, and questions. She couldn't shake the image of her dad standing next to Alexander Drake and Victor Langston in that old photograph. It wasn't just a coincidence, it had to mean something. But how could she get closer to the truth without putting herself in danger? She knew she couldn't go at it blindly. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets anymore. It was about navigating a world where power ruled and people like her didn't stand much of a chance. As she got ready for work, Emily decided to take a risk. If she wanted answers, she needed to face Alexander Drake again. not as a barista handing him coffee, but as someone demanding clarity. She didn't know if he'd even agree to meet her, let alone talk about the past. But she had to try. After all, he was the only direct link she had to the man who might hold the key to her father's story. Later that day, after her shift ended, Emily went home and wrote a letter. A short, simple note explaining who she was and why she needed to speak with him. She didn't reveal too much, just enough to pique his curiosity. "I think we have something in common," she wrote, careful not to sound confrontational. She folded the note neatly, sealed it in an envelope, and included her phone number before dropping it off at the front desk of Drake's skyscraper office building. It felt like tossing a message into the ocean, hoping it would reach its destination. Days passed, and Emily started to doubt whether her letter had made any impact. Maybe he ignored it, or worse, maybe he threw it away without giving it a second thought. She tried to stay focused on her daily routine, work, studying, helping her mom, but her mind kept drifting back to what-ifs. What if he never responded? What if she was chasing ghosts? Then, one evening, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number popped up on the screen. "Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m., my office." That was it. No name, no explanation. But Emily knew exactly who it was. Her heart raced as she stared at the message. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. Part of her wanted to celebrate, but another part felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. What if this meeting didn't go well? What if Drake shut her down completely? The next afternoon, Emily stood outside the towering glass building where Drake's company headquarters were located. She had dressed carefully, not too casual, not too formal, hoping to strike a balance between confident and respectful. As she walked through the revolving doors, she couldn't help but feel small. The lobby was massive, with polished marble floors and sleek furniture that screamed wealth. People bustled around, talking on phones or typing furiously on laptops. No one paid attention to her as she approached the reception desk. "I'm here to see Mr. Drake," she said, clutching her bag tightly. The receptionist gave her a quick once-over, clearly skeptical. "Do you have an appointment?" "He asked me to come," Emily replied, holding her ground. She showed the text message as proof. After a brief hesitation, the receptionist nodded and told her to wait. Minutes later, a young assistant appeared and escorted her to the elevator. They rode up in silence, the numbers ticking higher until they reached the top floor. When the doors opened, Emily stepped into a private suite that looked more like a penthouse than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, and every piece of furniture seemed designed to impress. And then she saw him. Alexander Drake sat behind a large desk, his expression unreadable. He gestured for her to sit across from him, his movements calm and deliberate. Up close, he looked different than he had in the cafe. Older, maybe, with faint lines etched around his eyes. There was a weight to him, a heaviness that suggested he carried burdens far greater than money could solve. "You're the girl from the cafe," he said finally, breaking the silence. His tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't warm either. Neutral, cautious. "Yes," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Drake leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "You mentioned my ring. Why does it matter to you?" Emily took a deep breath. This was her chance. "Because it's connected to my family. My dad, he disappeared years ago. Before he left, he gave my mom a ring that looks exactly like yours. I need to understand why." For a moment, Drake said nothing. He simply stared at her, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrest of his chair. Then slowly, he removed the ring from his finger and held it up to the light. "This ring belonged to Victor Langston," he said. "He gave it to me when I was starting out. Said it symbolized loyalty and trust." Emily's stomach churned. So Langston really was involved. "Did my dad work for him too?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Drake hesitated, as if weighing his words. "Your father. Yes, he worked with Langston for a while, but things got complicated. Your dad wanted out, and Langston doesn't take kindly to people walking away. What happened to him? Emily pressed, leaning forward. Where is he now? Drake sighed, looking away. I don't know. One day, he was there, and the next he was gone. Langston made sure of that. Anger flared in Emily's chest. What do you mean, made sure? Did he hurt him? I can't answer that, Drake said sharply. But if your dad's alive, he's probably better off staying hidden. Trust me, you don't want to dig deeper into this. Emily clenched her fists. Why not? You act like you care, but you're part of this too. You wear that ring like it means something good, but it doesn't. It represents lies and fear. Drake's jaw tightened. For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. You're right, he admitted quietly. I've done things I'm not proud of, things I can't undo. But I didn't know your father. By the time I met him, it was already too late. Too late for what? Emily demanded. For saving him, Drake said, his voice barely above a whisper. Langston has ways of dealing with problems, permanent ways. The room fell silent. Emily felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She had suspected something terrible might have happened to her dad, but hearing it confirmed, even indirectly, was devastating. Still, she refused to give up. If Drake wouldn't help her, she'd find another way. I need to know the truth, she said firmly. If you won't tell me, I'll find someone who will. Drake studied her, for a long moment, his expression softening slightly. You remind me of him, he said unexpectedly. Your dad. He had the same fire in his eyes. That's probably why Langston hated him so much. He couldn't control him. Emily swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Then help me. Help me finish what he started. Drake hesitated again, torn between caution and something else, remorse perhaps. Finally he nodded. All right, he said. But you have to promise me one thing. Be careful. Langston's reach is longer than you think, and he doesn't forgive easily. Emily nodded, determination burning in her heart. Whatever it took, she would uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for her dad and her mom, and maybe, just maybe, she could bring justice to those who deserved it most. The days that followed Emily's meeting with Alexander Drake were a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries. For the first time, she felt like she was getting somewhere, but every step forward seemed to uncover more questions than answers. Drake had agreed to help her, though reluctantly, and together they began piecing together fragments of the past. What started as a simple curiosity about a ring had turned into a full-blown investigation, one that neither of them could walk away from. Drake opened up in ways Emily hadn't expected. At first he was guarded, choosing his words carefully and avoiding direct answers. But as they spent more time digging through old documents and photographs, he gradually let his guard down. He admitted things he'd kept buried for years, things that weighed heavily on him. Like how Victor Langston wasn't just a mentor, he was a predator who thrived on control and manipulation. How Drake himself had been complicit in some of Langston's schemes, even when it went against his conscience. And how, over time, he'd convinced himself that success excused everything. Emily listened intently, her heart torn between anger and pity. She wanted to hate Drake for his role in all of this, but she couldn't deny the regret in his voice. It was clear he carried guilt, not just for what he'd done, but for what he hadn't stopped. When she asked him why he never stood up to Langston, he sighed deeply. Because I was scared, he confessed. Scared of losing everything I'd worked so hard for. Scared of becoming invisible again. Langston knew exactly how to keep people in line, with promises or threats depending on the situation. Your dad. He wasn't afraid like the rest of us, that's what made him dangerous. What do you mean? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He tried to expose Langston, Drake explained. Not directly, but he gathered evidence, letters, contracts, recordings. Things that would have ruined Langston if they ever saw the light of day. But your dad underestimated him. Langston found out and, well, after that, no one heard from your dad again. Emily's hands trembled as she processed his words. The pieces were finally falling into place. Her dad hadn't abandoned them. He'd been silenced for trying to do the right thing. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. All these years, she and her mom had carried the weight of his absence, believing he'd left willingly. But the truth was far crueler. Still, Emily refused to let sadness consume her. If anything, it fueled her determination. She needed proof, something concrete that could confirm Drake's story and honor her dad's bravery. Together, they combed through archives, contacted former associates of Langston's, and tracked down anyone who might have crossed paths with her father. It wasn't easy. Many people were hesitant to talk, either out of fear or loyalty to Langston. But slowly they began to gather clues. One breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired accountant named Mr. Thompson. He had worked under Langston decades ago and remembered her dad vividly. According to him, her dad had been passionate, driven and unafraid to challenge authority. He used to say art should be free, not chained by greed, Mr. Thompson recalled fondly. Langston hated that, hated anyone who questioned him. Mr. Thompson also mentioned a storage unit her dad rented shortly before he disappeared. No one had touched it since then. It was still paid for under a false name. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Could this be where her dad had hidden the evidence? With Drake's help, she located the storage facility and managed to gain access. Inside, they found boxes filled with sketches, journals, and personal belongings. But most importantly, there was a locked metal case tucked away in the corner. Using a combination written in her dad's handwriting, Emily opened it. Inside were files detailing Langston's illegal activities, bribery, extortion, embezzlement. There were even audio recordings of conversations where Langston threatened business partners and rivals alike. Her hands shook as she flipped through the documents. This was it, the proof her dad had risked everything for. The weight of it overwhelmed her. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the magnitude of what he had done and the price he had paid. Drake watched silently, his expression grim. "Your dad was braver than I'll ever be," he said softly. "He fought for justice even when it cost him everything." Emily nodded, clutching the files tightly. "We can't let his sacrifice be in vain," she said firmly. "This has to come out." But exposing Langston wouldn't be easy. Though he had vanished years ago, his influence lingered. His empire spanned industries, and those who benefited from it weren't likely to give up power without a fight. Drake warned her that going public could put both of them in danger. "Langston may be gone, but his network isn't," he said. "People will try to protect his legacy." Despite the risks, Emily was resolute. With Drake's resources and connections, they devised a plan to release the information safely. They reached out to journalists known for their integrity, ensuring the story would reach the right audience. They also involved legal experts who specialized in corporate crimes, preparing for whatever fallout might follow. As the days turned into weeks, Emily felt a mix of fear and hope. Fear because she knew they were stepping into dangerous territory. Hope because she believed the truth could set them free. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her family's pain was acknowledged and justice served. One evening, as she sat at home going through the documents with her mom, she noticed something tucked inside one of the folders. It was a letter addressed to her and her mom. Her dad's handwriting filled the page, shaky but heartfelt. In it, he apologized for leaving and explained why he had to disappear. "I love you both more than words can say," he wrote. "If anything happens to me, know that I did it for you. Never stop fighting for what's right." Tears blurred Emily's vision as she read the letter aloud to her mom. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then her mom reached out and held her hand. "He loved us enough to risk everything," she said quietly. "Now it's our turn to finish what he started." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of strength. Whatever happened next, she knew they wouldn't face it alone. Together, with Drake's help, they would bring her dad's story to light and ensure his courage wasn't forgotten. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Powerful people didn't give up without a fight, and Emily knew they'd face resistance every step of the way. But she also knew one thing for certain: the truth was worth fighting for, and this time she wouldn't back down. The day finally came when the truth could no longer stay hidden. Emily and Drake had worked tirelessly, piecing together her dad's evidence into a cohesive story that would expose Victor Langston's empire of corruption. Journalists were briefed, documents were organized, and legal teams stood ready to handle any backlash. It was a risky move. Langston's shadow still loomed large over the city, but Emily refused to back down. She owed it not only to her dad but also to all the others who had suffered because of his greed. When the story broke, it sent shockwaves through the city. Headlines screamed about the dark secrets behind Langston's rise to power. The public was outraged, demanding accountability from those who had profited off his crimes. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from his name, while business partners tried to cover their tracks. For once, justice seemed within reach. But the fallout wasn't limited to Langston's legacy. People began asking questions about everyone connected to him, including Alexander Drake. Reporters camped outside his office building, eager for a statement. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, pointing out how he'd benefited from Langston's schemes while claiming to regret them now. Some even questioned whether he was using Emily's story as a way to cleanse his own reputation. Drake took the criticism in stride, knowing he deserved every bit of it. He held a press conference where he admitted his role in Langston's operations and vowed to make amends. "I can't undo the past," he said, standing tall despite the weight of scrutiny. "But I can use my resources to help those who were harmed by it." True to his word, he donated millions to charities supporting struggling artists and families affected by corporate exploitation. More importantly, he handed over control of his company to independent trustees, ensuring its future wouldn't be tainted by his mistakes. For Emily, watching Drake confront his past was both inspiring and bittersweet. She admired his willingness to change, but she couldn't forget the years they'd lost because of men like him. Still, she recognized the importance of redemption, not just for Drake, but for herself too. Uncovering the truth hadn't brought her dad back, but it gave her closure. It reminded her that his fight hadn't been in vain. One evening, after the dust had settled, Emily sat with her mom in their small apartment. They had spent hours reading letters and looking at old photos of her dad, laughing and crying in equal measure. Her mom smiled softly, holding one of the pictures close to her heart. "He always believed in doing what was right," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "even when it scared him." "I know," Emily replied, reaching out to squeeze her mom's hand. "And now everyone else knows too." Her mom nodded, wiping away tears. "Thank you for finding him again, for bringing him home." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Home wasn't just a place, it was a feeling. And for the first time in years, she felt whole. Her dad's courage lived on in the changes they had sparked, in the lives touched by the truth, in the reforms pushed forward by journalists and lawmakers, and in the bond between her and her mom. A few weeks later, Emily attended a ceremony honoring her dad's memory. Drake had arranged it, using his connections to ensure her dad's work and bravery were properly recognized. The event was held at a local art gallery, where some of her dad's sketches were displayed alongside tributes from people he had inspired. As Emily stood before the crowd, she felt a mix of pride and peace. Her dad might not have been famous, but he had made a difference. That was enough. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered, clutching the ring tightly in her palm. It no longer represented loss or mystery. It symbolized resilience, love, and the power of standing up for what's right. As the ceremony ended, Emily stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights twinkled above her, casting a warm glow over the streets. Somewhere in the distance, a busker played a soulful tune on his guitar. Life moved on, as it always did. But Emily knew her dad's spirit would remain alive, in the stories told, in the injustices fought, and in the hearts of those who remembered him. She glanced at Drake, who stood nearby talking quietly with a journalist. Despite everything, she felt grateful for his help. He had started this journey as a stranger, but along the way he had become something more. A reluctant ally, a changed man, and perhaps even a friend. She didn't know what the future held for either of them, but she trusted that they would carry the lessons of the past forward. Walking home under the starlit sky, Emily allowed herself to dream again. Not just of a better life for her and her mom, but of a world where people like her dad weren't silenced for speaking out, where courage was rewarded, not punished, where truth mattered more than power. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she imagined her dad smiling down at her, proud of the woman she had become. His fight might have ended years ago, but hers was just beginning, and she intended to honor his memory every step of the way. The days following the ceremony were a mix of reflection and action. Emily found herself caught between two worlds, the quiet comfort of her everyday life and the whirlwind of change she had set into motion. The city buzzed with talk about Victor, Langston's downfall, and while some celebrated the exposure of his crimes, others whispered warnings about rocking the boat. Power didn't vanish easily. It shifted, adapted, and sometimes struck back harder. Emily knew this all too well, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had kept her family silent for years, and now she understood that silence only fed the darkness. Drake continued to play a pivotal role in the aftermath. His decision to step away from his company shocked many, but it earned him a new kind of respect. People began seeing him differently, not as a ruthless billionaire, but as someone willing to confront his past and use his privilege for good. He threw himself into rebuilding his life, focusing on mentoring young entrepreneurs and funding projects that aligned with ethical values. Though he never said it outright, Emily could tell he was trying to make peace with his own conscience. Their relationship evolved too. What started as an uneasy alliance turned into a genuine friendship. They met often, discussing everything from legal updates to personal struggles. Drake listened patiently when Emily talked about her dad, offering insights without overstepping. In return, Emily encouraged him to keep pushing forward, reminding him that redemption wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. But not everyone approved of their partnership. Critics accused Emily of being manipulated by Drake, claiming she was just another pawn in his public relations game. Some even suggested she should have gone to the authorities instead of working with him. At first, the accusations stung. She spent sleepless nights wondering if she'd made the right choice. Had trusting Drake been a mistake? Could she have done more to protect her dad's legacy? One evening, after a particularly grueling day of interviews and accusations, Emily called her mom. "Do you think I messed up?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if people are right? What if I let him take credit for what Dad did?" Her mom sighed softly on the other end of the line. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "Your dad didn't fight so people could argue over who gets the glory. He fought because it was the right thing to do. You've honored him by bringing his truth to light. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Emily took her mom's words to heart. Slowly, she stopped worrying about what others thought and focused on what mattered most, ensuring her dad's story inspired meaningful change. She began speaking at community events, sharing her journey and encouraging others to stand up against injustice. Her talks resonated deeply, especially with young people who felt powerless in the face of overwhelming odds. Seeing their hope reignited her own. Meanwhile, the legal battle raged on. While Langston himself remained missing, several of his former associates were arrested and charged with various crimes. Investigators uncovered a web of corruption that stretched far beyond what anyone had imagined. Banks, real estate firms, and even government officials were implicated, forcing widespread reforms. It was messy, chaotic, and exhausting, but it was also necessary. Through it all, Emily stayed grounded by leaning on the people who mattered most. Her mom, Drake, and a growing circle of supporters who believed in her cause. One of them was a retired journalist named Mr. Carter, no relation, who had covered Langston's rise decades ago. He became a mentor of sorts, teaching Emily how to navigate media scrutiny and stay true to her message. Another was a young artist, named Mia, whose father had lost everything to one of Langston's schemes. Together, they formed a grassroots movement aimed at supporting victims of corporate exploitation. As months passed, Emily noticed subtle changes in herself. She no longer felt like the same girl who had nervously approached Drake in the cafe. That version of her had been timid, unsure of her place in the world. Now she carried herself with confidence, unafraid to speak her mind or challenge authority. Her dreams hadn't changed. She still wanted a better life for her family, but her perspective had widened. Success wasn't just about money or fame. It was about making a difference. One afternoon, as she walked through the park near her apartment, Emily spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench. It was Drake staring out at the pond with a thoughtful expression. She hesitated for a moment before joining him, sliding onto the bench beside him. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," she teased lightly. He chuckled, though his eyes remained serious. "Sometimes it feels that way." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching ducks paddle across the water. Finally, Drake spoke. "I've been thinking about your dad a lot lately, about how brave he was. I wish I'd known him better." Emily nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. "Me too, but I think he'd be proud of us. Not perfect, but trying." Drake smiled faintly. "That's something, isn't it?" "It's everything," Emily replied, her voice steady. "We can't fix the past, but we can shape the future, and that's worth fighting for." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily felt a sense of calm wash over her. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready. For the first time in her life, she truly believed in the power of hope and in the strength of those who refused to give up. When she returned home later that night, she placed the ring carefully back in its box. It had started as a mystery, a symbol of loss and unanswered questions. Now it represented something entirely different: resilience, justice, and the enduring bond between generations. No matter where life took her next, she knew one thing for certain: her dad's legacy would live on, and so would her fight.